You already know more than you think. You've just never been taught to read the signs. Every person leaves clues, tiny, almost imperceptible traces of who they are beneath the surface. And Nietzsche's psychological truths exist to teach you what to look for, how to interpret it, and what it means for both others and yourself. This is a skill no one teaches, but once you see it, you can't unsee it. People aren't mysteries, they're patterns. And when you notice those patterns, you start to understand actions not as random or malicious, but as signals. Signals of fear, longing, insecurity, or the unhealed wounds of a past self. This isn't a simple list. This isn't surface-level advice. Each truth flows into the next. Each builds on the one before. Skip one, and you lose context. Misunderstand one, and you misread everything else. But if you stay, by the end, you won't just understand others. You'll begin to understand yourself in ways that feel almost revolutionary. So let's begin. From childhood, you're taught to trust words. Say what you mean. Mean what you say. But Nietzsche warned us that language is rarely neutral. It's survival. It's ego. It's fear. Words are armor, performance, camouflage. The overly kind, the overtly confident, the constantly cheerful. None of them are always what they appear. And most deceptive of all, they're hiding from themselves, not from you. So we start here, with the mask itself. Truth 1. Every mask hides fear, not fakery. Nietzsche said every profound spirit needs a mask, not to deceive others, but to survive. Consider this. A man who laughs too loudly at a social gathering, a woman who posts endless highlights of a perfect life, the co-worker who remains unnaturally calm in a crisis. These aren't acts of malice or fakery. They are shields against a world that can be harsh, rejecting, unforgiving. The mask is built from fear. Fear of judgment, fear of rejection, fear of being overlooked. It's armor, and like all armor, it isn't perfect. Look closely at how people move when they're performing. The forced smiles, the slight tension in their posture, the way their tone sharpens when a sensitive topic arises. These are cracks, and in those cracks, the real person begins to emerge. Masks also reveal patterns. Someone who consistently avoids conflict is revealing not just patience, but the fear of being unaccepted. Someone who always seeks praise might not be vain. They might simply be afraid of invisibility. When you begin to see these cracks, you start noticing a larger pattern. Most people aren't acting from malice or ego alone. They're acting to survive themselves. And once you see that, you're ready for the second truth. Truth 2. Criticism is projection in disguise. Projection is one of Nietzsche's most piercing insights. When people criticize, mock, or attack others, it often reveals the very traits they refuse to acknowledge in themselves. The colleague who constantly points out laziness, they may secretly fear they aren't doing enough. The friend who ridicules arrogance, perhaps they're terrified of their own inadequacy. This is projection, not deception, but unconscious confession. And it works both ways. What irritates you most in others often mirrors what you deny in yourself. That coworker's impatience, maybe it's reminding you of the part of yourself that rushes through life. That relative's arrogance, perhaps it's a shadow of your own unacknowledged pride. The beauty of this insight is doublefold. First, it stops you from taking criticism personally. That attack isn't about you, it's about them. Second, it creates clarity. When you notice repeated patterns of projection, you begin to read beyond words. You see the hidden struggle, the insecurity, the fear behind every sharp comment. And when projection meets silence, another truth appears. Because sometimes, the loudest reveals aren't in what people say, they're in what they refuse to say. Truth 3. Silence speaks louder than words. Nietzsche didn't trust language. To him, words were tools of the herd, often used to avoid facing reality. Silence, on the other hand, is raw. Pauses, hesitations, and awkward changes in topic reveal what words cannot. Think of it. Someone dodges a question about their feelings, or answers with a short, rehearsed reply when pressed. That silence isn't emptiness. It's a story. It's fear, avoidance, or an unhealed wound showing through. The moments someone can't speak are often more telling than the moments they dominate conversation. And silence interacts with the mask and projection in interesting ways. A person may overstate virtue, criticize loudly, or perform confidence. But the moment they stop talking, the mask cracks. A look, a gesture, a pause. They all expose what someone truly feels, but cannot admit. Nietzsche urged us to pay attention to these moments because they are the windows into the soul. Silence also teaches patience. You can't rush understanding. You can't force someone to reveal what they're hiding. But when you learn to observe the pauses, the subtle shifts, the micro reactions, you gain access to truths most people will never consciously articulate. Truth 4. Loud morality masks. Ego. After observing masks, projection, and silence, the next revelation is about virtue. Nietzsche noticed that morality, when performed loudly, often conceals something deeper. The ego, the person who constantly preaches, corrects others, or publicly broadcasts their goodness, isn't always acting from integrity. Often, they're trying to prove something to themselves, or to others, that they fear they aren't. Think about it. The coworker who corrects everyone's behavior, but never acknowledges their own mistakes. The friend who dominates debates about right and wrong, while secretly struggling with ethical choices in private. Or the influencer who brands themselves as a beacon of morality online. These behaviors aren't just about virtue. They're about control and reassurance. Loud morality serves as a shield. It creates a barrier that keeps criticism away and admiration close. Nietzsche called this the will to power in disguise. Morality becomes performance when it needs validation. True goodness doesn't need applause. It acts quietly, consistently, without the need to prove itself. This truth is essential because it teaches us how to read moral posturing, not with judgment, but with observation. When someone's virtue is performed excessively, it often signals an inner struggle, a fear of not being enough, a need to maintain authority or dominance. Recognizing this allows us to move beyond surface behavior and see the human reality beneath it. Truth 5. Self-deception comes first. Closely linked to masks, projection, and performed morality is self-deception. Nietzsche observed that people rarely lie to others before lying to themselves. Consider the statements you've heard countless times. I'm fine. I don't care. I'm over it. These are not lies intended to manipulate. They are lies that people have convinced themselves of to survive. Self-deception is a coping mechanism. It allows a person to navigate a world that can be painful, confusing, and demanding. The inconsistencies you notice in someone's behavior, contradictions between what they say and what they do, are often windows into these self-deceptions. Take the overachiever who brags about independence but constantly seeks reassurance, or the always happy friend who avoids discussing struggles. They've been telling themselves the story they want to believe for years. These patterns, once recognized, provide a path to understanding. They show us where fear, shame, or guilt reside, and reveal what the person is struggling to face internally. Self-deception isn't inherently negative. It's human. And once you recognize it in others, you start to recognize it in yourself. This is where reading people transforms from judgment into insight, and insight into compassion. Truth 6. Superiority is overcompensation. Another layer of understanding arises when observing those who act above it all. Nietzsche argued that the person who constantly reminds others of their achievements, who casually dismisses others, or who seeks to dominate isn't always confident. They're compensating for inner fears. Superiority is often a mask covering vulnerability. Think about the CEO who needs everyone to see their brilliance, the parent who lectures endlessly to prove wisdom, or the friend who always one-ups everyone. Under the mask, there may be insecurity, doubt, or fear of being overlooked. Real confidence, Nietzsche insisted, doesn't compete. It simply exists. It doesn't need to dominate, perform, or advertise itself. When you notice someone overcompensating, observe carefully. Their actions may seem assertive, even aggressive, but they are signals of fragility. Someone controlling, judgmental, or boastful is often doing so because they are terrified of being invisible or insufficient. This truth ties directly to the previous ones. Masks, projection, silence, and virtue all interplay with this overcompensation. The loud moralist, the overconfident achiever, the exaggerated performer, they are all expressing the same human reality: fear. And fear drives behavior more consistently than desire or principle. Truth 7. Fear drives most actions. By now, we've explored masks, projection, silence, morality, self-deception, and overcompensation. All of these behaviors ultimately trace back to one root force: fear. Nietzsche observed that most human actions are driven not by desire or rationality, but by the unconscious attempt to avoid loss. Think about the people you interact with every day. The coworker who overexplains every decision, fear of being judged. The friend who dominates every conversation, fear of being overlooked. The partner who constantly agrees even when they clearly disagree, fear of abandonment. These behaviors, repeated endlessly, are survival strategies. Humans rarely act from pure wants. We act to protect what we hold dear: love, reputation, security, or a fragile sense of self. And fear is rarely obvious. It often hides behind competence, charm, or confidence. But once you learn to look past the performance, it becomes clear. Asking, "What are they afraid of losing?" often reveals more truth than "What do they want?" Recognizing fear as the engine of behavior is transformative. It changes your perception from judgment to understanding. Someone who seems controlling is not inherently cruel. They're scared. Someone who criticizes harshly is not inherently mean. They're afraid. Fear colors every action, every word, every gesture. Seeing it is the first step toward compassion. Truth 8. Envy hides inside attacks. Closely tied to fear is envy. Nietzsche's sharpest observation was that attacks often conceal admiration and self-denial. People don't always attack others out of hatred. They attack because the other embodies qualities they secretly long for, but believe are unattainable. Consider the colleague who undermines a confident team member, the friend who mocks someone's success, or the stranger who criticizes someone's appearance. Their aggression is often less about the target and more about their own unfulfilled desires. envy becomes a protective mechanism, allowing them to avoid confronting their inadequacies. Understanding this truth rewires how you perceive criticism. It is rarely a reflection of your shortcomings. Instead, it's a window into someone else's struggle. If you can see envy in action, you stop taking attacks personally. You also begin to recognize it in yourself, noticing the subtle ways you compare, compete, or diminish others to soothe your insecurities. This truth connects directly to projection and self-deception. Envy, fear, and overcompensation form a cycle. People attack what they long for, hide behind performance, and convince themselves it's about morality, fairness, or principle. Nietzsche's insight is that breaking this cycle begins with recognition. See the envy, and you see the human reality beneath the mask. Truth 9. Exaggeration reveals insecurity. Exaggeration is another subtle but powerful signal. When someone declares, "I don't care what anyone thinks," chances are they care deeply. When someone insists, "I'm always happy," they likely are not. Nietzsche recognized extremism and exaggeration as the ego's way of silencing doubt. Think of the social media personality who presents a life of constant adventure and joy, or the friend who claims they'd never get hurt or disappointed. These extremes aren't strength, they are defenses. They are attempts to control perception, to maintain an identity that feels safe, admired, or untouchable. Exaggeration interacts with all the truths before it. It is a mask, a projection, a performance, a reaction to fear, and sometimes a manifestation of envy. It's how insecurity broadcasts itself to the world. When you learn to see beyond the exaggeration, you discover the subtle truth beneath the performance. For instance, someone who constantly boasts about independence may secretly fear being alone. Someone who insists they are always calm may be terrified of losing control. Nietzsche's teaching here is simple but profound. Extremes are not always authentic. Often, they are signals of what is unacknowledged, avoided, or feared. Truth 10. The desire for control masks vulnerability. If fear drives us and envy colors us, what happens when those forces feel overwhelming? We grasp for control. Nietzsche saw this urge everywhere, in relationships, in politics, in faith. Control is rarely about power for its own sake. It's usually about managing the anxiety of unpredictability. Picture the parent who micromanages their child's every choice. On the surface, it looks like discipline. Beneath it, though, it's fear of the child failing, or worse, drifting away. Or take the leader who imposes rigid rules, masking a deep unease about chaos and rebellion. Even in intimate relationships, subtle control, deciding where to go, what to eat, how to speak, often emerges when one person feels unseen or unsafe. The irony, Nietzsche notes, is that attempts at control rarely create safety. They breed tension, resistance, and distance. Because control is a mask, it hides the fear of being powerless, rejected, or abandoned. The tighter someone clings, the more obvious their hidden vulnerability becomes. When you see control not as cruelty, but as a confession of fear, the human picture changes. It's not about domination, it's about fragility. And once you recognize that, you can choose, either get pulled into the tug of war, or step back and see the deeper story unfolding. Truth 11. The persona is always a performance. Control naturally leads to performance. If we can't control reality, we try to control how we are perceived within it. Nietzsche often described society as a grand stage, with every individual playing a role, sometimes several at once. The Persona, literally the theatrical mask, becomes our currency. Think about how you act differently at work, with friends, with family. None of those roles are fake in the cheap sense. They're adaptive. They help you survive. But they are still performances. Even the act of saying, "I'm just being myself," is a performance, curated for effect. The danger comes when we mistake the mask for the face. When someone gets lost in their role, the tough one, the reliable one, the funny one, they start editing themselves, shaving off the raw edges that don't fit the script. Over time, the performance becomes the prison. Nietzsche's warning wasn't to reject performance, it's unavoidable, but to become aware of it. To ask, am I choosing this role, or has it swallowed me? When you realize every human interaction is theater, you gain freedom. You stop expecting raw, unfiltered truth in every moment, and instead look for the cracks in the script. Those brief flashes where the human behind the role slips through. This connects back to exaggeration, envy, projection, because performance is where they all live. And if you want to understand someone deeply, don't just watch the role they play. Watch what happens when the role falters. Truth 12. Repeated patterns are hidden confessions. Finally, Nietzsche's 12th truth. Nothing reveals a person more than their patterns. Words can lie. Masks can mislead. Performances can convince. But behavior, repeated again and again, speaks louder than intention. Look at your own life. What kinds of people do you attract? What mistakes do you repeat? What frustrations keep circling back? These aren't random accidents. They're confessions of your inner world. A person who always chooses unavailable partners is confessing their fear of true intimacy. Someone who repeatedly sabotages opportunities is confessing their discomfort with success. Nietzsche believed that patterns are more honest than declarations. A man can say he values truth, but if he constantly lies to protect himself, his pattern tells the real story. A woman can say she values independence, but if she repeatedly seeks controlling relationships, her pattern reveals another desire beneath the surface. And this loops us back to the very beginning. Masks, projections, silence, morality, self-deception. All of these are revealed in time through patterns, because you can only wear a mask so long before repetition betrays you. Patterns are fate made visible. The invitation Nietzsche leaves us with is not despair, but clarity. If you study your patterns, you study yourself. If you trace them back, through fear, envy, exaggeration, control, performance, you uncover the truths you've been avoiding. And from that point, the question is simple. Do you dare to change the script? Or will you let your patterns keep confessing on your behalf?